I'm trying to figure out how we...
I have a pink and purple plaid shirt that I almost wore today. I'm glad I didn't.
You should wear plaid at all times.
I can't even figure out the Twitter thing. I don't know.
All right, we are live on Twitch and on YouTube.
All right. Hello, Internet.
Hey, Internet. Hey, nerds. Somebody got really angry I called the Internet because it's like, you know, say it's Internet, but so it's like, okay, hey, nerds. I've been trying to use that. Hey, special treat today. Yes, the people you want to talk to, AMD Scott Herkelman, Robert Halleck. We're going to be talking Ryzen, Radeon, all that stuff. What are the ground rules? Ground rules are we're trying to keep it clean, trying to get Disney sponsorship, hoping to get integrated into the MCU universe. Not going to happen probably, but I have a whole comic book series I've made up.
Okay.
Nerd man.
You have to have
PC
goals.
gamer gets bitten by radioactive case, turns into super. Yeah, okay, that's not going to go anywhere. I'll go to Netflix instead. I love making fun of Netflix sometimes. Okay. Where's my notes? Okay.
You can still relax.
You're still getting everything spun up? Okay.
Yeah.
We're not ready to go yet. You're going to let us know?
Yeah.
Everybody give Dan a break. Give Dan a break. The man just had
Just
a
getting
baby.
back. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
just getting back.
Literally
rusty.
first day of work.
He hasn't had a lot of sleep.
He made a tiny human. It's very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Well, I don't know.
To be fair, I didn't do much of the work, really. You know, my role was quite minor.
Support role, tech support.
Yeah, exactly. Let's.
Don't undersell yourself there, Dan. It's a lot.
There's a comment already saying this show is about bald heads and beards.
That's true. It's actually, we were just discussing that.
not wrong.
To be on the show, you must have to be bald. Where's your beard?
Or the beards, you're right. No, it would just,
beard.
it would look terrible. It would just,
It's called age.
my kid's like, you should have a mustache. It's like, no, it would just look horrible.
Age and travel
Oh, you should definitely grow a mustache, Gordon.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
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 Bad mustache?
Yeah.
with handlebars.
That would be cool if you could. Does the handlebars naturally come in, or you got to let it grow and then?
You got to make it.
Yeah, I think you have to like wax it or something. I
Yeah, twist it.
Oh, okay.
All
That
right,
would be
Gordon.
so cool.
I think I'm crossing my fingers. I think we're good to go.
Oh, really? Okay,
That's
we're
always,
live.
That's always the
Are we-
optimistic
we are-
tone you want to hear from the
we're
video
live.
producer.
Oh, we're going to YouTube and Twitch, or
Yeah,
okay,
they're
but-
both live, and people are.
Hey, everybody! If you're just joining, everything should be spooled up now. We have a special treat for you on the Full Nerd. It's a full house. Got AMD here. We can only talk about public things. So if you're gonna go, I want to know how this does and this one benchmark and this one instance. I can't talk about it.
7/7, July 7th. You will
July
learn.
7th.
Mm-hmm.
So Robert is gonna. But we can't talk about. I mean, there's not much left that you can't talk about. It feels like because
That's true.
you showed so much. But should I kick this off, Dan?
Yep, let's do it.
So try to get your questions into the YouTube chat. I also have some Twitter questions I'm going to ask, but we got a lot of questions. These gentlemen don't have that much time, and also George is sitting here. He's going to look at us. He's going to be like, "No, don't answer that question." Stop. But no, I'm just kidding. Give George a hard time. But ready?
Let's do it.
Going to try not to screw this up on the first time, as I usually do. In this episode of The Full Nerd, okay, here we go. Sometimes you mess it up on purpose. It's actually like a thing. Okay. In this episode of The Full Nerd, AMD's Robert Halleck and Scott Herkelman talk Ryzen 3000 and Radeon 5700 series. Welcome to the Full Nerd special episode. This is a special episode of the Full Nerd. I'm your host, Gordon Maung, with co-host Brad Charkis.
Hello.
And in the house, we have none other than, I'm going to go right to left, Scott Herkelman of AMD and Robert Halleck of AMD.
Hey, everybody.
These are the people you want to talk to about all things Ryzen 3000 and all things Radeon 5700, but also got to give a special shout out to Dan Masaoka. Back from having a baby, folks. If we have problems with this stream, if he doesn't hit the record button, don't blame him. He just had a baby. Give the man a break.
I guarantee there will be something going wrong. So, but Adam seemed to think a rusty me would be better than nothing.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, definitely. Should we give a shout out to the new baby? Some people don't want to use the names. I was suggesting Kobe because Dan's a Lakers fan.
Yeah, that's true. Kobe's not a bad name.
Yeah, Kobe, you should just like slip that in there. So
No, but we went with Leo.
okay,
Leo Amaru Masaoka.
Okay, so
Welcome to the world.
Welcome,
Solid
Leo. When
A-roll.
you are watching this YouTube stream in 25 years, like, hey,
that was me.
Dad's talking about me on the YouTube. I just want to get that in there. But the important thing now, nobody cares about the other stuff. Sorry. They want to know about Radeon. They want to know about Ryzen. I'm going to take the first question because I know everybody wants to ask. And it's actually not about the technology. It's a lot of exciting things about Radeon, a lot of exciting things about Ryzen, but a lot of it's about personnel shifting. People seem to care more about who's going where. This person just went there. I read a rumor here. This person gone there. I heard a rumor, and I want to ask you that Kevin Durant is going to AMD.
That would be awesome.
That would be great.
That's only for basketball fans.
If he came to AMD, I don't think I would leave wherever he was. I would just sit next to him the whole
So
time.
it's true. It's confirmed KD to AMD.
Good trade. Good trade.
That'd be a good trade.
Yeah.
Of course, the real question is a lot of rumors about Frank Azor, one of the creators of Alienware, very, very early, basically one of the forefathers of gaming PCs, going to AMD. Rumors, can you say?
I think at this time it's just a rumor. I've known Frank a long time. A lot of us have. He's a really good guy, but I think at this time it's just a rumor.
Just a rumor. So
Yeah.
just a rumor. So we don't. It's just like the KD. That's why I brought that up, because if you follow basketball, it's like it's insane. The entire sports media, NBA media, is just focused on where KD is going to go in the off season. So.
Yeah.
Got to get those clicks.
And and a lot of it, and I bring that up because who knows where he's going? I mean, he knows, I guess, but
Nowhere.
But so if you're all concerned about that, we don't know. Brad, I don't want to monopolize this. Brad, your turn.
My turn. I have nitty gritty questions. I figure you can just kick things off with an overview first or something.
Oh well, okay. Well, I already know because from E3, you've got one and Computex. Apparently, one badass CPU coming. One
do indeed.
decently badass GPU coming, but there's going to be some zingers for you, I think, from people. But you want to start off with Ryzen?
Let's do it.
We've only seen your numbers are when we actually finally see performance results independent, when they get into consumers' hands, are we going to be pleasantly surprised, or is it just you've been picking numbers to make the part look better than it is?
No, that's a really good question because the numbers that we publish publicly, that's actually my day job for Ryzen. And, I care a lot about producing numbers that, yes, of course, make AMD look as good as possible, but are also realistic for customers. Because if they're not realistic, then we get in trouble and people are disappointed. And, a $200 CPU is a lot of money. A $500 CPU is a lot of money. So there's integrity that you have to publish those numbers. So I want to be clear that I think the gaming story will be comparable. I think there'll be a big lead in content creation and a big lead in power efficiency because of 7 nanometer. And I think that's what people are going to see on launch day.
Wow, I thought I was going to get more attitude, kind of like throw down, like, yeah.
I think one of the things Ryzen as a brand and all the employees who work on it really value is being transparent and honest about what that product is, for good and for bad, because it frankly it makes the job easier to do, and it ingratiates the product and yourselves to people who might buy, and that's the smartest, most honest way to do business.
Okay, look at that, being straight here. Is it going to be? Is Ryzen going to? I guess the other question, I do want to ask, how proud are you of this product?
Tremendously. I've been at AMD, it'll be 9 years total as of August 10th. And it's by far the most competitive product that I've ever worked on, the most technologically advanced for its time that I've ever worked on. And it really is a joy to work with it, to work on it, because there's just so much to talk about that's new and interesting and good. And it does feel kind of like Athlon XP, Athlon 64 all over again. That was my heyday growing up, 13, 14 years old, reading Boot magazine. Yeah. And it feels like that time again.
Wow. I mean, because definitely Athlon XP. If you think about it, we rank 1 gigahertz K7, I guess, Athlon, right? And then you have Athlon XP, Athlon 64. Does this part feel as significant or more significant than those previous three?
I think it's more significant in that if you look at all the things that you can do from a technological perspective, process technology, core architecture, packaging technology, platform technologies, and then the BIOS and firmware features you throw on top, this has leadership in every category. And that was not true necessarily of the previous products. Like, they were very competitive and they were very strong, but they didn't always lead in process tech, for example. So when I look at this, I really do think that these products, in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, will be viewed as sort of a historic moment for AMD. I really do.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking like this is like first ballot Hall of Fame, CPU Hall of Fame for these.
I think
this
so.
part probably.
I hope so.
Too many sports comparisons there. I don't want to leave Scott out of this. For Radeon 5700, 5700 XT, publicly, let me make sure I've got this right. You're saying 2070 performance?
Yeah, let's talk about that. To Robert's point, the data that we showed at E3, public data, we measured it against the 2070. But what we didn't say is actually against the 2070 Founders Edition. And the Founders Edition performs up to 5% faster than a standard vanilla 2070. And so we didn't say that on purpose because we wanted to leave a little bit of goodness out there in most of the comparisons. So I think on July 7th, when you see a lot of the data and the performance reviews, you'll see that that's a $599 card today, the 2070 Founders Edition. And where we've priced this product and the fact that we actually tested it against the Founders Edition, not the vanilla 2070, I think gamers will be pleasantly surprised with the performance that they're going to get at the price point that we've offered.
Okay. I didn't know that it was an FE version, but
yeah, that's right. So all of our data runs that we showed at E3, all the public data was against Founders Edition, not only 2070, but also the 2060.
I guess I think too is for NVIDIA, Founders Edition's cards in the old days used to be sort of like a baseline performance, and you move up from there. But with the 2000 parts, they definitely sort of bumped up instead.
Yeah, they have a 2070, which is their standard, and then they have their Founders Editions, which are their fast parts. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to put out data. The new AMD, the new Ryzen, the new Radeon strategy is to, communicate well what we think the real performance is and be transparent. So on that slide, you actually saw a wide variety of performance, good performance, and even places where we lose, because we think gamers really care about honesty. And they really care about, what game are they playing and what result will they see? Because gamers don't play every game, but they play an assortment of games. And so it's important when you choose a GPU, what GPU do you want to play your favorite games? So we wanted to show accurate data. We wanted to show where we win and lose and make sure that we're transparent about that process of how we collect our data and how we analyze it.
Yeah, I will say after Navi was launched, it was a really long build up. We finally got Navi. There were some people. It was interesting. There were a couple different camps that I wouldn't have expected to break out. One was, why is Navi not a 2080 Ti killer or competitor?
Yeah.
And the other one was like, it's too expensive. I expected RX 580 pricing for this card. Can you address both those?
Yeah, let me start with, I still believe today the Radeon 7 is a really good competitor to 2080. And it's for multiple workloads. And like we mentioned last time I was here on your podcast, actually, we talked about creative workloads and even gaming workloads with the frame buffer advantage that we have with that card and the price point. So I think that is our product to compete against the 2080. With Navi, we specifically, 3 years ago, targeted this segment to bring out a new GPU. And we're timing it appropriately for the market. So we look at the market and talk to all the game developers, all the console manufacturers, everybody out there, all of our OEM ecosystem, and we say, where's the heart of the market? And the heart of the market is in the GPU space, between, call it $200 all the way up to $500. And so we wanted to come out with GPUs in that space, and Navi, we targeted Navi specifically for that. And then if you look at the features we're adding, we're timing the features to when the ecosystem is going to be ready. And so those are some of the things. If you look at some of our console announcements, we see with our partners in the console space, we see ray tracing and some other features as more forward-looking features, and we'll be ready when the ecosystem's ready and when the game developers are ready. We don't feel like we need to force anyone to adopt ray tracing. We want to be there when they're ready, and that's something that you'll see in our roadmap out in time. But it's super important for us to really hit that mass market price point where people want great performance for the value of the dollar, and we believe that Navi's achieved that.
Okay, because you're basically saying you're giving people $2070 $600 GPU performance for
$449.
$449.
That's right. That up with the XT. That's right. And so, and it wasn't widely known when we did that performance chart. And I was excited to come talk to you today and give you the update that it was against the Founders Edition, because not very many people know that unless you read the legal notes that we put in the last slide, which nobody does. But
except Reddit.
I do
sometimes Reddit.
Yeah.
But we wanted to, the old Radeon would have said we were the best thing ever, and we would have showed just wins. And I think that our new approach, I read Reddit every day, and I never respond because you sometimes you can't. But one of the things, the biggest complaints are, hey, how do you brand your products? There's a lot of questions of why do you call it 5700, and the Radeon stack is very confusing, so I'd like to address that today.
Okay.
And then the other thing is just be honest. Where does the GPU fit? And so our first step in launching Navi is be honest with our performance, and then make sure that we're clear with wins and losses. And that's the new Radeon we want to set forward. Going forward, you'll see us correct our branding. We do not want to do things that are confusing with our brands and our designators. Like, for example, you'll see XT as our top performing part. You'll see no moniker for our standard part. And then we want to iterate every generation. So the next generation will be something iterative off this naming scheme. And we want to just keep that consistent for the next 5 to 10 years and make sure that we're super clear on the performance levels, things that are maybe tweaks in performance or different variables of either frame buffer size or features. We want to make it super clear going forward and consistent, so that way gamers can recognize our brand, they can recognize our stack, and they know what they're buying into across the world.
And is it also because you sort of have three competing brands still existing? Because we have RX 580, we still have Vega.
That's right, Radeon 7. I think
that's 4. My gosh.
So I think over time we will clean all that up with and this is the start of our new naming system. And we want to make it super understandable. And that's something that we spent a lot of time over the last couple of years debating internally. There was a lot of different iterations of the branding. But one thing that was nice to do with Navi is with our new architecture, new RDNA architecture, gave us a chance to just reboot everything. To reboot how we go to market, to reboot how we talk to gamers about our performance, and to reboot how we brand things. So I think as you see over the next few years, we're going to really make it a really conservative effort to make it make sense to gamers and less confusing, because we have been confusing in the past, I think. And I think it's our opportunity now to set the record straight going forward that will make it a little bit easier to understand and how it all flows. Yeah.
Well,
that's great to hear. I'm encouraged by that.
You could add super or something like that. Maybe awesome.
Super duper.
Super
maybe.
awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
I want you back to CPUs.
Wait. Before we go on, just since you mentioned Vega, I was just wondering, are these cards going to replace Vega, or are those getting moved down the product stack?
I think that we still are selling Vega in the marketplace, but these cards in that market space will eventually go away. You're talking about the Radeon Vega 64 and the Radeon Vega 56. So those are still available today, but these cards will be replacing most of that demand that's in the marketplace today. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
For CPU stuff, Robert, at E3 at the Editors Day, there was a lot of talk about Windows optimizations that went into place with the latest May update. 1903 is what I just call it. It's easier. It essentially sort of corrected some issues with the Ryzen's architecture and where the threads go to different of the CCDs, right?
Yeah, so we have a unique CPU topology where you have a cluster of 4 cores, then some cache, and another cluster of 4 cores. And that is unique in the industry. And each cluster of 4 cores in the 3rd gen Ryzen has local access to 16 megs of cache for a total of 32 in the CPU die. And we were finding that there were workloads that were very lightly threaded or low priority that would get kicked around between CCXs, or the process would spawn multiple threads, but they'd be on different CCXs. And that does incur a latency penalty because you have to go through the IO die on the chip and go back up to the other CCX. So keeping threads local to a cluster before spawning more threads or before migrating them, that's gonna help with performance. And but it is circumstantial too. I want to be clear about that. For applications that are lightly threaded, older DirectX 9 type games, I'm thinking of games like Skyrim, CS:GO, Rocket League, and games running at a lower image quality preset. That's where it's most beneficial. It is not a universal uplift.
Yeah, and that's one thing I wanted to get to ask you, because I did some initial testing on a Threadripper, 32 core Threadripper, 20, awesome CPU, 32 cores, but four chips, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, 1903 is really going to like bump up my performance, and I didn't see anything. And that is sort of, it's not going to be everything, even on lightly threaded.
It's not everything, and we want to be really clear about that. It for us, this change was working on edge cases. As you continue to iterate architectures over time, you can spend more time working on edge cases to bring up things that people do that are popular, but are not universal. And so this was an opportunity for us to check a box on something that is not universal, but is important to certain types of users.
Okay, and it definitely can help some. It's just
Absolutely,
we got to look for those nuggets, but not a universal 50%
That's right.
bump. Okay. The other thing I need to make sure we get straight, since we're on that topic, is 1903 gives you the improve scheduler.
Yep.
But that clock ramp latency is only going to happen with the driver.
That's correct. So if you have Windows 10 version 1903 today, any Ryzen CPU has access to the new topology awareness. However, that other thing, it's called CPPC2. Just a brief primer on that. Our CPU works at a 1 millisecond resolution internally. If we want to change clock speeds, we could do that in firmware as quickly as 1 millisecond. But until version 1903 of Windows 10, it was happening at 30 milliseconds. So 30 times slower than it could have been done. So with this new feature, when you install the chipset driver that will be available on July 7th, and this is only for 3rd gen Ryzen CPUs, but when you install that chipset driver on July 7th, the CPU will be in complete control of its own clock speed selection. So instead of 30 milliseconds, it's 1 to 2. And so that helps with bursty workloads like application launches, web page rendering, etc. But I want to be clear, you need a new chipset driver for that. That comes July 7th.
Okay. But definitely, and also only on the new chips.
Correct.
So not on the older 2000 parts.
That's right.
Huh, okay. Brad, I don't want to monopolize again. You want to answer
It's cool.
yourself?
I have a quick question for Scott, actually. I don't know if this has been answered before, but I'm curious about it. So Ryzen 5700 is coming out, roughly the same ballpark as Vega 56 and Vega 64 launched, price-wise. And those cards had HBM2, and AMD's been a big, proponent of HBM2. I was wondering why you guys went with the GDDR6 for these cards.
Yeah, I think it's all opportunistic for us, and new technology and what we see in the memory market and how we apply that to new architectures going forward. By the way, we are not ruling out HBM2 in our roadmap. We will continue to support that in markets that make sense. I think for Vega, we have planned that out. You make these decisions, 2 or 3 years out in time. And at that time, when we made the decision for Vega, it made sense for HBM2, and it still does. But the pricing of HBM is very volatile, as well as just regular GDDR6, by the way. And so we made this decision on GDDR6, 3 years ago, roughly. So we try and predict markets out in time, and I think that the boost GDDR6 gives us is nice, and the pricing is as of today is a little bit better than HBM as well. So we're able to hit better price points, still get great performance, and a little bit wider adoption across the marketplaces that we're trying to service with these products. It's just a little easier for our OEMs and other places to procure GDDR6 than it is HBM type of memory. So I think that for us, it's a little bit wider adoption of that memory topology than HBM, and it's a little bit easier for us to predict markets. And when more of the consuming public in the PC space buys GDDR, it makes it more cost efficient for us and predictable.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. I just had another. Oh, sorry. Go
I was
ahead.
going to say, there's a question from YouTube. Does the 1 millisecond thing work on X370 motherboards?
Yes, it does. That is internal to the CPU firmware. So if you have any motherboard with a BIOS update to support 3rd gen Ryzen, you will get that capability.
Oh, good. That's good to hear.
As a X370 owner, I'm happy to hear that.
Very good.
But now they won't buy X570.
Well, I mean,
I just
to that point though about not buying X570 or buying X570. This is a strategic decision that we made years ago with Ryzen to have this kind of upgradable socket. Socket AM4 started at 28 nanometer, 4 core, 4 thread, PCI Gen 3, and today it's 16 core, 32 thread, 7 nanometer. Like nobody has ever attempted that level of upgradability in the history of x86 market. So yeah, there will be people who stay on those older motherboards, and that's okay because it's user friendliness that the other guy doesn't give you.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy to think 28 to 14 to 12 and now a 7 nanometer part in the
same socket.
Although
I was talking to Rob and I think it was Jim Pryor right before the original Ryzen launch, and you guys were talking to me about how you guys are planning to support AM4 through at least 2020, I think it was at the time, and that played a big part in my decision to invest in my personal rig, Ryzen, actually. So I think that's an important part.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing us pay that off right now. I mean, the 3rd gen Ryzen is launching. Obviously, it's going to go into 2020, and there it is, right? That's AMD making good on that promise that we made 3 years ago.
What would be a major inflection point to come out with the AM5 though?
It would have to be something that changes the pin count of the processor or the data pins on the processor. There's nothing imminently on the horizon for that.
I mean, I think everybody sort of expects DDR5 to be that thing that sort of like forces everybody to make a change. It could be. I'm going to just float this now because I had loved this idea. It's like you have AM5 with DDR5. Although now it doesn't make any sense, and PCIe 5.
Oh my!
It's like 555.
Well, they just ratified
like 777.
They just ratified PCI 5, right? Yeah.
I know.
Or 6, or I don't remember.
That I should ask you that because a lot of people said, well, PCI 4, they already have PCI 5. Of course, then 2 weeks later we have PCI 6.
6, yeah.
Do you think a lot of people say, well, maybe you should have waited for PCI 5? No?
These standards always move into the market at a slower pace than I think end users expect. They're always like an 18 to 24 month horizon. A PS, not a promise of when AMD is supporting PCI Gen 5. But the reality is that these standards turn from ratified paper specifications into shipping products on a much longer horizon than people think. So Gen 4, that is the standard, the leading standard for a while. And we're the only game in town that has it. So I'm not at all worried about Gen 5 suddenly popping up and replacing Gen 4.
Yeah,
I have a question that piggybacks off of that for Scott, actually. So the Radeon 5700 is the first graphics card that also supports PCIe 4.
That's right.
And there are going to be, obvious compute and stuff like that, workloads that could take advantage of that. I was trying to think of a gaming workload that would take advantage of that because current graphics cards don't really saturate PCI 3 so much. I was wondering if maybe going to PCI 4 could improve Crossfire performance.
Maybe. We should talk about that maybe offline.
Okay.
But I would say that it would have to be a very, very corner case for gaming workloads. What we find, by the way, why we're in the graphics space so excited about PCIe Gen 4 is a large majority of people buying gaming GPUs from us and from our competitors are using creative workloads, even all the way down to $200. Mm-hmm. And so in these creative workloads, whether, when you're in a fully enabled ecosystem with the CPU motherboard, like Ryzen's offering, and now a GPU, in creative workloads, there are some good benefits to that heavy or the increased bandwidth. And so it's, I would be remiss to say that it's, there's not a lot for gaming, but what I would say is people who buy gaming GPUs use them more than just gaming. And we see that all the time in our driver usage and in feedback from consumers. There's much more of a benefit in creative workloads today for that new standard than there is maybe in gaming as of today. But in Crossfire situations, I think we should talk about that when we're ready to talk about that a little bit more publicly about how that could saturate the bus. But a lot of that depends upon developers adopting multi-GPU inside their game. And we would love to see it, but it's a lot of extra work And what we're finding out is about less than 1% of the population uses multi-GPU in games. And so even for those people who do, they might see some benefit, but it's really corner case, game dependent, and situation, resolution, all that kind of stuff that has to factor into it. But it wouldn't be a reason why I would suggest for someone to buy a PCIe Gen 4 for specific gaming multi-GPU workloads today.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is it are developers actually, once they now have access to PCIe 4, now they have access to essentially affordable 8-core? I mean, 8-core CPUs, that's like almost standard these days. Is that going to push developers to, hey, I'm going to support this now, finally, we're going to...
Well, the exciting news is because the Ryzen team has really pushed the core count. I mean, they have been leading the industry over the last couple of years, as we all know, to add more cores. It takes time for developers to see that, and it takes time for them to maybe think about how engine adoption can be different. And not only that, but even our creative ISVs, developers, once they see that penetration in the market, they get excited, because that's now a boost in performance that they've never been able to go after before. So that we've already started seeing momentum across the ISV ecosystem and across creative developers to say, now what can I do with all these extra cores? And I'm so happy, because I run the ISV team as well for AMD, that because of Ryzen's lead in core count and threads, it's really pushing the ISVs to come up with new ways to think about how they can make their games run faster, how they can multi-thread it, and then provide more value to end users, both in game scenarios as well as creative workloads. So I think we're just starting to see some of these applications come out. But I think over the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to see a lot of really great things enabled just because of what the Ryzen's team has done with cores and threads.
Could the same thing happen with PCIe 4? Because I imagine developers go, well, I really don't want to saturate PCIe because I know there's only so much. Most people are probably on 3, but with 4 here, if it gets more widespread, could they go, now I'm going to use this? It was brought up with the consoles. Microsoft pushed this. You can't talk about your customer, of course, but they said game level loads will be awesome because of our new SSD design.
Yeah, I think, so let me answer it this way. I think there's always game developers, can it run Crysis? There's always game developers who are just like, I don't care what the penetration is, I'm going to produce the best looking, heaviest, PC game I can. So we'll have some of those games, we will see as a community have some of those games come out over the next couple of years. And we love those guys because they just push the limit to the max. And that's why I think if, when we discuss later about multi-GPU, there's some really interesting things going on with these game developers now that they're seeing this extra performance come out in the CPU and a renaissance of the GPU pushing even more performance, and with PCIe Gen 4 and others, that I think you'll start to see more games really trying to figure out how can they differentiate visual fidelity and performance inside a game that they want to launch over the next couple of years. So there's going to be some exciting things that we just can't talk about right now because it's too early, but it's definitely enabling that next level of fidelity in games over the next couple of years.
The other thing I would say is, I do hear the question sometimes, what am I going to do with all those cores? And the alternative is really, really unappealing to me, which is only designing hardware for the stuff that's available today, which means nothing ever gets any better. And stagnation in the gaming market, why would we want that? Why would anyone want that? I want a better looking game, faster hardware, better PC. So yeah, sometimes that means creating hardware that's slightly ahead of the curve, and that's okay because it inspires other industries to move forward too.
Yeah, and also the important thing is at a lower price too.
At a lower price, yeah.
Because that getting it in everybody's hands is one of the main drivers, I think, of the renaissance we're in right now.
Absolutely.
Because, I was just thinking the other day, I think people beat up a little bit too much on Intel sometimes because they didn't push thread counts. But then I think back to Westmere, with 32 nanometer, they had a 6-core part. It's like, 10 years ago or something like that?
Yeah.
And they had to just drag developers to try to use 12 threads in a CPU core, and they got nowhere. I mean, it was like they got like 2 developers that ever supported it. And it almost feels like they kind of gave up. You know what? We don't care. But and then at the same time, I think maybe developers are saying, if you didn't charge $1,000 for that 12 6-core Westmere Gulftown part, we would actually support it. So
game developers want millions of gamers playing their game. And I think what's great about the last few years is now we're starting to see the whole industry move to more cores, more threads. And it's going to be a momentum that game developers are going to want to say, they're going to say finally, now that millions of gamers have access to GPUs and CPUs and more bandwidth, more cores, more threads, they're going to say, what else can we do inside of our game that the mass market will be able to use and play? And, at the end of the day, they care about millions of gamers playing their game, and they want to make the best looking game, but they have to, shoot right. They have to shoot straight towards where the most part of the market can play their game.
Yeah. I mean, Crysis is a great example because it's a meme now, but people who didn't live through the Crysis days,
Yeah. It was heavy.
it was like incredible.
It was heavy.
And, I don't think they really sold a lot of them because everybody...
Not everybody could play it.
It's got to be maddening for hardware folks because with games, it used to be like, oh my God, why aren't you using all of the cores and all of the all the GPU units? Look, I've got all this hardware, but you're not using it.
Yeah.
And then like that's what the consumers say, and then a game developer comes out and they take advantage of all the cores and all that hardware, and then suddenly the people who don't have the highest end machines are like, oh my God, this game is the most unoptimized game I've ever seen.
That's right.
Which I don't really square. It's like you were asking for them to use your hardware. They're using it now. You can't complain about that. But.
Yeah, and that's why, by the way, it's an exciting time to work for AMD is because on every front, CPU, motherboards, GPUs, we're pushing that edge to game developers, and we're trying to lead that effort with ISVs, both gaming and creative workloads, to increase the performance and increase the fidelity and do something unique with all of them. And I think without us really having that complete product lineup, there's not one company that owns all of that like we do. We're able to go into ISVs and say, hey, look, we have the full solution. Let's work on this together. And let's create more Crysis. Let's create more games that take advantage of all this extra performance and make sure that, gaming is not only thriving over the next couple of years, but we're pushing the boundaries and giving gamers more of what they want, which is fidelity and high frames per second.
I mean, we're gamers too. Like we want awesome games also.
Let me lead real quick. That actually touches on something that somebody asked me on Twitter the other day, and the answer is more complicated than I could answer in 280 characters. But they asked me with Radeon now and the two major consoles, it's in the cloud. It's you guys just signed a deal with Samsung for the mobile parts.
Yeah.
They were wondering, why does AMD need to make desktop graphics cards?
Why? Well, for gaming.
For
creative workloads. There's always going to be, by the way, just speaking about cloud, this is just my own gamer opinion, but I believe it's going to grow the gaming ecosystem.
I do too, definitely.
I think that it's going to bring more people in to try it, and then they're going to realize that when they're at home, in their home environment, they're going to want a premium, low latency experience. And I think that as they try on the go in a notebook environment or in a maybe they're traveling at a hotel, and we all know hotel internet speeds suck. I do have a complaint about that. But I would say that I think that it'll bring more people into the game space. And I think more people will try. It's just like what mobile phones did for gaming. And people love playing mobile games. And what it created is this really nice industry that started branching off into what else can you do with the mobile game? Well, now you see Fortnite go across different applications and different, mobile to console to PC. And that Fortnite ecosystem has really grown the passion for that type of a game. And I think that has just brought more people into the community, youth all the way up to older people like us who now play sometimes
classic
Fortnite.
Gamers.
And so,
Classic
our
Vintage.
view is wherever gaming is, we want to be there for. And graphics is a major part of every type of touch point, console, mobile, cloud, PC, notebook. And we want to be there for them. And we've invested in all of those. And that's why we're super confident about, timing ray tracing right, because we're in all of these spaces and we're in a major player in all of these spaces. And we feel like we've timed it right. When we're ready for ray tracing, we think the ecosystem to be ready for ray tracing. And we want to make it a great implementation where we're not penalizing on performance and dollars. We're timing it right for when the major players in the ecosystem are ready.
I think you could also make the case that a desktop discrete GPU is an excellent pipe cleaner for these other markets.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the most performance, the most technology, the highest demand from the customer base. So that's where the innovation goes, and it trickles into all these other markets. And there's an innovation story for the desktop GPU as well.
So
I totally agree. And now I can go back to that guy and say, here, I asked for you.
There you go.
You touched on ray tracing. I just want to ask a quick follow-up question. Like NVIDIA they enabled ray tracing on the old Pascal GPUs, even though they don't have dedicated ray tracing hardware. Did you guys have any discussions about that? Do you have any plans to maybe do the same for Radeon cards?
We continue to discuss it. We continue to discuss our strategy for ray tracing. Our view is we want, when games are widely available, and it's not just Dig Dug or Pitfall, we want to make sure that it's high performance, doesn't penalize your GPU, and that the demand across the ecosystem is ready for it. And so, I think that when we take a look at our ray tracing support strategies, we want to make it be a great experience. There's nothing worse than trying a new feature out and you get a huge hit in performance, and then you have to do some sort of trickery with technology feature, DLSS in this case. Then you get a blurry image. And then what it did, I think if you look over the past year, all the gamers we talked to and the game developers, it really put a bad taste in everyone's mouth of what ray tracing is. And that's not what that technology is. I mean, that technology is a forward-looking, awesome technology when implemented right and when everybody's ready. And it is definitely the future. So don't get me wrong, it's definitely the future of real-time ray tracing in games. Just it needs to be done right, and it needs to be done where gamers feel they're getting a tremendous amount of value and they're not feeling bad about it. That's not what we want to do, is give gamers a technology that they feel bad about trying and that they feel penalized for trying.
Okay. Yeah. So you guys launched, what was it? Content adaptive shading and Radeon image sharpening?
That's right.
Image sharpening. Are those kind of setting the steps for you guys? Will that play into your ray tracing vision in the future? Is that like setting the steps in hardware?
Yeah, that's right. So we're using some features today that don't have a performance penalty, and it improves the image quality. But you'll see that implemented out in the future in our roadmap with real-time ray tracing when we're ready. And we're going to continue to adopt those. And an open GPU, I think we announced that we're putting it on GPU Open, our website that allows developers, anyone, even our competition, to download it and implement it if they wish. And so our strategy is that we want to make it widely available for all game developers. You don't have to sign a special contract or pay for, some licensing fees. It's for you to use, and it's for you to adopt in your engine. And if you can't adopt in your engine, we have Radeon image sharpening that can do all that for a gamer right inside of our driver across games. So I think our view is, let's make it open, let's make it free. The only way to really push gaming, in our view, is to make everything open. Because then people can innovate off of drivers or tools or APIs that they can get for free, and go do the innovation that they want to do. We don't want to restrict it. We want to say everybody should have access to it. We shouldn't penalize our competition. Our competition can use it if they want. Let everybody have access to it, so that way gaming continues its growth trajectory that we all want to have happen.
Can I have one more follow-up question? I'm shutting out Gordon over here.
That's
so
fine,
you
right?
were kind of touched about open standards. One of the biggest improvements in the new Radeon Media Engine is for DisplayPort 1.4, the display stream compression for 4K 144 hertz monitors. Yeah. Could you talk about that and some of the benefits it brings? Because like on the G-Sync HDR monitors, like to reach those rates, you have to hit 422 chroma subsampling and stuff like that, or other things. What's the benefits of the display stream compression?
Yeah, I think you'll just get a lot, our GPU will now be able to feed a lot more bandwidth and higher resolution with HDR. I think it's 8K HDR at 60 hertz, and it's, like you mentioned, 4K at 144 hertz. And so it's enabling the ecosystem with the hardware vendors first. And we announced at E3, ASUS is going to be coming out with a monitor very soon. We'll let them announce the date, but it's important for us because we're in such a lead in the monitor ecosystem. There's no doubt about that we have won the FreeSync battle. It's a easy win for us. We have now over 600 monitors fully supporting FreeSync. So it's important for us to get this early DisplayPort 1.4 DSC out there, start seeding the monitors, and then now we have to work with the game content developers to make sure that they're taking advantage of that extra bandwidth and producing HDR. Because if you've never seen HDR, especially on a 144 hertz 4K monitor, it is absolutely gorgeous. You have to see it in person, you have to experience it. But now with DisplayPort 1.4, our GPUs can support that really nice high fidelity. And so, but it does take some work. We have to make sure the game developers are ready. They're enabling it in their games. They're enabling it across the ecosystem. And so we're just, announcing just ASUS right now, but there's going to be a whole host of monitor panels supporting it going forward that I think will make the gaming community excited.
Also, Brett, to your point, sorry, about chroma subsampling, if anybody out there has ever seen like a 422 or 420 chroma subsample display, text rendering is not pleasant.
That's
On,
Yeah,
on
it gets
that kind of
bad.
monitor. It gets bad real fast, and it looks okay for gaming and stuff, but any interface stuff doesn't look great. So display stream compression in 1.4 allows you to do that high frame rate 4K at 444, which is and it's visually lossless. So it looks great. Text is sharp and clear, just like you would see on a 1080p display or 1440p display or normal 4K display. But now you're looking at it with HDR, high frame rate. It's the ideal display technology.
That's actually a minor feature, I guess you would call it, but it's one of the ones I'm looking forward most to in these new Radeon cards.
Me
so.
too.
There was a question on YouTube about why is the 5700 series locked? If they can for overclocking.
Locked. It's definitely not locked for overclocking.
Oh, okay.
No,
I think
not
they're
locked.
talking about VBIOS,
VBIOS.
like swapping out the BIOSes and stuff. It's
Well,
gamers.
Yeah, let me just talk a little bit about our plan. So 5700, you can definitely overclock the 5700. You'll definitely be able to overclock it at launch, and then of course shortly after launch, our AIB partners will be in market with their own versions. I know there's some debate about the blower decision. I would love to address that, but our AIBs will have all of the various designs, overclocking capabilities, their own tools that they put in their boxes to allow gamers to tweak it and overclock it. All that will be standard and available.
And does that include voltage?
You will have, well, we have Wattman. So Wattman, you can, tweak our overclocking and all of the parameters in Wattman today, and that'll be standard with the 5700 at launch.
Can you talk about the blower decision? Because I was just retesting Vega 64 the other day, and I'm like, I forgot how much I don't like testing the Vega 64 blower edition. So why did you guys choose to go with the blower
Yeah,
edition?
so let's just hit that head on. From internal at AMD, there was a varying debate about axial versus blower. And what we found out is the enthusiasts watching, the nerds watching your stream right now, I would be comfortable with them selling them axial fans. Because they normally, the enthusiast community knows how to cool a PC. But there are some pockets of gamers that aren't experts in cooling a PC and thermodynamics and how to properly control airflow. And what we found out is it's more safe for us to produce a great graphics card to exit the air out of the case than produce an axial fan where a gamer who might not know how to cool their PC well enough might run into problems and throttling because they don't have the proper fan placement or cooling systems enabled on their PC. So it's just consistent performance out of the box that we can guarantee with the blower design. And AIBs will be shortly behind this with their own axial fans. So if you're an enthusiast and you must have an axial design and you prefer that, it's going to be coming out soon. It's going to be coming out very soon behind the blower. But for us, it was a decision to say, I know that I can, when I put up that performance chart at E3, I can hit these numbers consistently for every PC in the world if I produce a blower design, because there's no throttling inside a chassis, and I'm exiting the air out of the system. The GPU doesn't run into temperatures that are due to a chassis, the heat in a chassis. So it's just consistent performance that I can guarantee initially at launch.
I mean,
That's the
you've
reason.
seen blower designs dominate this industry for 20 years.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why. It's the most reliable thermal solution for every user.
Yeah.
Straight up.
You
But
just can't
there's
predict.
enthusiasts. By the way, I fully concede there are enthusiasts that know how to cool their PCs.
Yep.
Even myself, I personally prefer an axial fan because I know how to cool my PC. I just couldn't guarantee the community and the public performance levels if I produced a reference board with axial, and that was something that it was a really tough debate that we had to make a decision on at launch. What do we launch with as a reference design? And we chose the blower for consistent performance.
So this one, did you guys keep acoustics more in mind after some of the feedback on Vega 64?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you'll be happy with the acoustic levels that you'll see in the reviews. We've much improved it greatly.
Okay.
I believe we've improved it really great. I think we'll find out when the reviews hit 7.7. But we've spent a tremendous amount of time on this. Can we get better? Yes. Blowers are typically a little bit louder. And so I think that if you're really sensitive to that, you should wait for our partners' designs. Yeah.
I should let Gordon ask a question now.
I want to ask a CPU question. So,
All right.
So Ryzen 9 3900X 12-core part, price $499, Core i9 900K, 488, 8 cores. does AMD see these parts actually, because the price is the same today
Sure.
that we believe, these parts really go head to head, right? Yeah. Or should we really be putting that up against the Core i9 9920? I mean,
No, I think that's the head-to-head
Okay.
compete with the 9900K. That's the point of the price, and the fact that we can jam 12 cores in there is just a benefit of our process leadership and the frankly genius work that our packaging engineers have done to put that many cores in the same old socket. So yeah, that's the head-to-head compete.
okay, because I mean, a lot of the benchmarks you showed off, you guys were whooping a 9920X,
Yeah,
which
well,
is
that's
not
a
$1,200 CPU, right?
That's a $1,200 CPU, so it's always nice to punch well above your weight class. But yeah, it's a mainstream processor in a mainstream socket. Yes, it's at the high end of that envelope, but that's a 9900K compete straight up.
Okay, because I just want to make sure I understand. Like, I don't want people to come back and say, well, they really wanted this to go against the $1,200.
Well, and I want to be clear about that. Like, if I take straight up answer, if I take business from a $1,200 processor from my competition, that's a win for me. So I don't think that's so bad.
Okay. And then there are rumors of price cuts. We don't know. I haven't even bothered to ask Intel because I know they ain't going to answer it. But there's rumors of, 9900K, and I imagine most of their parts taking a haircut. Do you think it's going to be enough to put their parts still in contention with your new Ryzen 3000s?
It's impossible to speculate, right? That's just right now trade rumors.
Right.
So who knows the veracity of that? But what I can say is that we have an extremely competitive processor portfolio from $200 to $500, and in September, all the way up to $750 with a 16 core. So we'll see, but I think there's a lot of competitive pressure coming from us on those parts.
Okay. On the Ryzen 3000s, you guys are calling this great big giant cache game cache.
Sure.
And for people who don't know, there's just a crazy, insane amount of cache on these new chips. And it benefits games a lot.
Sure.
But it will also benefit other applications, so I imagine.
Sure, it benefits anything. So actually, I want to tackle something up front. I've seen some consternation, especially from power users who are saying, you're essentially just trying to rebrand L3 cache. And I want to be very clear, it's L3 cache.
No, it's
right?
game cache. It's game cache.
It's
Robert.
L3 cache, right? And we know that. Everybody listening to this podcast knows that. But the other thing that I would say is that we are actually a small section of the overall market, us enthusiasts. And there are markets out there who don't know microarchitecture, don't even know what L3 cache is, and may not even know who AMD is as a company. And we have about 5 seconds to capture their attention in a retail space. So I have this feature, this ability, I put double cache size in going from 2nd gen to 3rd gen, and that improves gaming performance by up to 20%. Independent of clock speed, IPC, all of it, right? Just the cache gives me up to 20% faster gaming. So I have to find a way to communicate that benefit to people, those people who may not know who we are. And so for that market, that's what game cache is. But, more generally, the whole idea of increasing the cache size was to keep more data on the chip, less fetching from memory. And a lot of the changes in Zen 2, in addition to the cache, were keep more data on chip, increasing the size of the op cache to prevent instruction redecode, adding another address generation unit to get more memory addresses on the chip rather than fetching them. Right? These are things that improve throughput and keep data local to the CPU, and that pays big dividends for many types of workloads, but especially games, because games do lots of random one-off requests to memory. And if you can keep it on the chip and shave like 35 nanoseconds off that request because of the cache, that's a huge boost.
And it wasn't possible to do this with 12 nanometer, just simply process. I mean,
It's just
too
area.
big. Yeah.
We have a limited amount of area to put transistors in, and 12 nanometers, we could not fit that cache into that area. But 7 nanometer, we could. And many of the front-end changes on the architecture also were process limited. So switching to 7 nanometer allowed us to build in some of these innovations in Zen 2 that were just not possible in the space before.
Are we going to see much of a difference in memory performance between a single, God, I always get it wrong, CCD, one chip versus a two chip 12 core versus the 8 cores?
No, from the perspective of the operating system, these are essentially monolithic designs. All the CCXs have common latency access to the memory because the memory controller is in the I/O die, so they're all hooked up centrally. And then cache requests are, aside from wire latency physically going across that wire, which is only 1 to 2 nanoseconds, it's a common cache access as well. So, it may look physically separated, but from the perspective of the system, it might as well be monolithic.
Sorry.
Yeah, I have 2 questions regarding CPUs. First, it seems like a lot of people have different motherboards. So what's the kind of performance difference they'll get with the new Ryzen, whether like on a B350 or 450 or X370, kind of across the board. And then everyone's shouting at me to ask you guys about 3rd gen Threadripper.
Okay, I'll tackle the motherboard question first. So, we behind the scenes, one of our engineering efforts is to design when you build a socket, you have to also define the thermal and electrical standards that go into that socket. And that's a set of minimum requirements that every motherboard has to follow. And so when you have a new generation of CPU that uses less power than the old one and has better thermals than the old ones, that means the same old sockets offer more headroom than they did previously. So there is no performance difference between 300 series chipsets, 400, 500, and that's by design. That we planned for that 5 years ago when we started designing these socket standards, and I think that's an incredible foresight from our engineers to build that into the plan. And then on the topic of 3rd gen Threadripper, first of all, it will happen, and there's not a whole lot I can say, but as socket AM4 moves up, Threadripper has to move up, right? And you will see what that means in time. But by no means is Threadripper going anywhere. We're the #1 selling high-end desktop platform, so why would we ever give that up?
It's just amazing because earlier you said, like, what would you ever do with more cores? The only place to go from 32 is to 64.
Well, people want more cores. We understand that, especially content creators.
And we want to give them more cores.
Has that? I wonder though, because when Threadripper came out, the big deal was has a crazy amount of cores for an incredible price. Have the ISVs moved now? Because they're like, whoa, we're getting 32 core chips for next to nothing.
Let me take a run at this, and then you can follow up. Is what we found some of the biggest adoption is in the entertainment space, movie creation. Heavy scene rendering. There's a tremendous amount of adoption in the professional space with Threadripper, and I think that's pretty exciting stuff for our engineers to see that they built this fantastic performing chip that's being widely adopted in the entertainment area. It may not be necessarily heavily used in gaming today, but in the entertainment creative space, it's widely adopted.
Yeah, there's this insatiable appetite for cores in certain market segments. People use virtual machines, do rendering, encoding, modeling, light map baking. They're just any number of cores you throw at that problem makes it better. And so, yeah, huge adoption there.
Yeah, and just like, I said this originally when Ryzen 1800X came out. AMD essentially democratized CPU cores.
Sure.
And here we are now. It's 12 cores for $500. That's the same thing 8-core 1800X cost, right? Was it? No, it was $529 with
pretty much.
no cooler.
Yeah.
You're getting a 12 cores, 7 nanometer with a cooler now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, damn.
It's a crazy time to be in the industry. The pace of innovation is really fast.
It's a great strategy because, like we talked about earlier, the ISVs, they have to see mass adoption. The only way to get mass adoption is have affordable price points with a lot of performance. And over time, you build that so they can build better things. So it's a really smart strategy that the CPU team has employed and the engineering team to make sure that we're giving fantastic new products out there at a cheaper price. So that way the community will build products and games around it. Yeah.
And so they are coming. You've built it and they're actually coming now. That's what I'm just trying to get a sense at those, because software development is always
takes a while.
years out, but the feeling is more cores, more threads will be used.
Well, it's essentially like ray tracing, right? You can't just announce ray tracing and have hundreds of games immediately.
That's not what I heard. You wait for all the games to be ready, then you make the GPU.
We heard it just works, but the reality is that's not the way it works.
Well, one of the things I
yeah.
would say about third gen Ryzen in general is it's sort of the best of both worlds. Generationally, when you factor in clock and IPC, it's like 21% more single thread performance. Okay, so that lifts all boats, right? Every workload gets better as a result of that. So if you have a lightly threaded workload, that's just substantially better than it was last year. And then you can factor in the cache stuff as well, and there's another uplift. But we also packed in more cores. So it doesn't really matter if you're doing the multi-thread stuff or the single thread stuff. It's both substantially improved in the product. So you can't really lose.
I'm going to ask a question, unless Brad, I don't want to monopolize everything.
You're on a roll.
So 7/7, this has been a topic among a lot of people. Like, it's July 7th is a launch. It's basically during a 4th of July weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
That means life is hell for anybody, for people answering questions, people asking questions. Traditionally, you don't launch on a major holiday in the United States. Most people would go, we're going to do it, give it a little buffer time. Is it that symbolism of 7/7/7 that valuable? 7 nanometer, just so people know, 7 nanometer, 7th month, 7 day. Is it going to be worth it? I mean, that's the main driver.
Well, actually, no. The main driver for us as a company is get brand new, fantastically performing products out as soon as possible. And our engineering team, trust me, they have very little sleep these days. And
Nice.
and the reason why is because we wanted to launch these brand new products as fast as possible. And it just so happens that our CPU engineering team, our GPU engineering team, have put in a tremendous amount of effort over these last couple of years, and they lined up perfectly to this date. And it was just a good marketing date to align to say it symbolizes the whole company effort on 7 nanometer, July 7th, availability for these two brand new awesome products to come together, categories. To come
Although I
together.
will say, 4th of July weekend, sitting on a patio, drinking a beer, eating a hamburger, is it really
much
that
more
bad of
fun.
a time to scroll on Amazon and buy something? I mean, just on your smartphone.
Clever. I like it.
I mean, you got time to burn, right? No, maybe not.
Oh,
Maybe not all of us.
You
but
you drink a few beers, or you just add to cart.
Impulse decisions.
Ryzen 9
Yeah.
3900X. Right? Yeah, just kind of burp. Buy. Nobody's looking at you. You
Yeah.
get home, a box shows up. When did I order this?
could happen.
On 7/7.
7/7.
7/7.
There's some questions and people are kind of asking, and maybe Gordon can actually kind of phrase this better, but people are asking about RAM speeds and overclocking options. So one is the RAM speeds between the X470, the B450, and the X570.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I can tackle that one. So we have done plug and play memory in our labs set up to around 4400. Just stick in the kit, load the profile, and go. Our partners like MSI have done up to DDR4 5100 on air, but I know there are people out there trying to piece together on PC Part Picker this hypothetical system that they're going to buy, and they're wondering, what RAM should I get? I really do think that the performance sweet spot, price performance, is going to be like DDR4 3600, C15 or C16. So take that to the bank. That's kind of the memory kit that you really want to buy for the price performance. But so what makes memory overclocking better? One, we have an all new memory controller in 3rd gen Ryzen that is a big help. We have new firmware for that memory controller. That's a big help. We've done a lot of BIOS work, not just in this generation of product, but coming off of 1st gen and 2nd gen, memory compatibility has progressively improved quite a lot. And then lastly, X570 has revised motherboard layouts, more PCB layers, different trace lengths and routing. And when you put all of that together, X570 is probably going to give you the best memory overclocking. But we're not talking about standing on the heads and shoulders above here, right? An X470 motherboard or a B450 motherboard is still going to give you a great experience because the majority of that overclocking benefit comes from the memory controller and the memory controller firmware that we provide.
Okay. How much are you going to give up? So 3600 kit parts are probably a little pricier if you went with 3200.
A couple percent.
So
when you're understanding how games access memory is really important. They're not typically bandwidth limited, but they make a lot of random one-off requests frequently to memory. So what we actually call it's the first word time. So memory is arranged in rows and columns, and how quickly can it find that first cell of data inside the memory, the first row and column, and that's called the first word latency. So there's actually not a lot of difference between DDR4 3200 at CAS14 and 3600 at C15. That first word time is very, very similar. So the performance difference is not all that big. But what the DDR4 3600 might give you is a superior memory bin. So it's physically a better quality chip, which would allow you to tweak the subtimings more or get more clock speed out of it, or even bring down the major timings to like 3600 C14. And that's a big step up. So, raw out of the box, probably not much of a difference, but that 3600K will probably be a better overclocker.
Okay. And people should remember, as you increase the clock speeds, latency goes down, even though it's a
Absolutely
bigger number, right? So I want to ask a question. There was recently a Reddit post. Somebody took the internal, I don't know if it's true or not, but it looks pretty authentic. The internal newsletter from Intel, I think it was Circuit News or something, and they talked, it was Intel basically talking about AMD and Ryzen and where it is. And it's amazing because, I'll tell you, 15 years ago, Intel wouldn't even say the word AMD. A long time ago, they used to think AMD, in fact, were traitors because, as we know, some of the AMD founders came from all ancient history. But this is now Intel publicly admitting to its employees, it's a huge force, that AMD's Ryzen 3000 parts are going to be these things are going to be, lean and mean, and actually admitting this to its employees. I was really kind of floored by this. Did you guys have any reaction? I mean, assuming it's true and not the most elaborate hoax ever.
By the way, I don't know if if it came from them directly. It looks like it, but it's a great free advertising for us. I think that to be honest with you, we track our competitors, but we are really only focused on ourselves and executing. And so if they're saying that about us, if that's a true thread and all those users that responded to that thread were true, that's great. We do feel like we're executing better, but we're not done. I mean, there's so much work we have to do that, I think the way that Lisa and the management team have refocused us on priorities. And, a lot of times that Lisa or other executives are on stage and they talk about we're a high performance computing company and we're executing and we need to execute. It's a statement to our 10,000 employees that the only way to outpace your competition and to make a difference in the marketplace is to focus on yourselves. Mm-hmm. Of course, you have to be competitive. Of course, you have to produce a good product. But you can only do that if you narrow your scope and you worry less about the noise and you worry about exactly what your goals are. And that's one of the leadership traits that Lisa has taught all of us is let's make sure we focus on ourselves, we execute to our plans, and we do what we say. And if Intel is now saying that we're doing that, that's great. It's free advertising, but it's not something that we take for granted. And that's why I'm so excited, and there's so many people excited to work for AMDs because we are a completely different company than we were 5 years ago.
Absolutely.
And we're all about executing, performing, and living up to our commitments. And do we make mistakes sometimes? Yes. We're humans. We are a human company, by the way. We're not a robotic corporation company like some people on Reddit call us. We read all those comments and it does hurt. But we do care. And the reason why you see these fantastic partnerships with Sony, with Microsoft, with Google, with Samsung is because we're a humble company just trying to win and execute and do the best that we can. And we're not arrogant. We don't go into a relationship saying, hey, you must do this, this, and this, and have all these T's and C's. It's like, how can we help you build a great thing?
AMD feels like a big little startup sometimes.
Yeah, it really does.
It really does.
And anyway, so that would be my explanation. If that is a true thing, then cool, thanks. I appreciate that. But we actually don't even pay much attention to it.
You sure?
That was a great answer, but for anybody who wants to know the real answer, find the YouTube version of this podcast and go back and look at the look that Rob and Scott exchanged when Gordon was asking this question, and there's your real answer.
Oh, please don't.
Oh, funny.
It's going to become a meme. Here it comes.
So, Gordon, I don't know if we have that much time left, but and this is probably going to be actually a quick answer, but people are asking, what are AMD's plans on like APUs?
Oh, yeah. I'll go and then you could go. So, what's really great and exciting about APUs is because of the performance the engineering team has put into not only our CPU cores, but also the graphics team is heavily involved with APUs in terms of software and bring up and optimizations, is we're finding that our APUs are able to drive these nice thin and light mobile designs. So now you can actually game for the first time ever on an APU on a notebook. You can travel and game and have a good performance in esports games, maybe low settings in AAA. But we have a huge performance lead in APUs, and it's our strategy, because we are a company with great both graphics and great both CPUs. If we can deliver great gaming and mobile thin and light platforms, we're super excited to do that. We are experts in graphics and gaming. Our competitors who have APUs are not necessarily as expert as we are. And I think that as we bring that performance to the table in thin and light designs, what you're seeing is a tremendous amount of awesome new notebooks come out with APUs that can drive great esports results or AAA games, maybe with lower settings. And it's something that we can offer to the gaming public that maybe not a lot of others can do.
I think on the desktop side, you've seen us talk a lot about third-gen Ryzen processors, but there are APUs as well, coming in the Ryzen 3000 family with, frankly, killer performance for the price points, and you'll see more about those on July 7th.
And, those are 3000s, but the APUs are still 12 nanometer based.
That's correct.
CPU. You obviously can't talk about future plans and all that, but I'm like, my mouth is watering for the 7 nanometer when it sort of trickles down to that part. I know, but
I understand. But, one of the things about having access to all these different process technologies is that we're allowed to, and we're empowered to make decisions that are right for different segments. And there's a certain performance threshold that those products need to hit, and 12 nanometer does that. And so we think it's the right process for the right products at the right time. And looking into the future, who knows? It'll be fun.
Sure. And also at the right price too, because
Price.
Yeah.
I think some people were a little bummed out that the new APUs that were launched were 12 nanometer parts, not 7 nanometer, but it's like, dude, do you want 7 nanometer leading process, most expensive thing out there, pushed down into a $65 APU? It just seems like a little
challenging.
I would say realistic. It's just sort of like asking for everything. Can I ask a question? This is definitely one thing I need to ask now. This is from our Twitter, and I hear this from a lot of people, and it's going to get worse and worse. But it's, how does Navi? I will read it correctly. How does Navi in console support ray tracing, and Navi on PC does not?
Is it all caps?
No, but that's.
okay.
I'm sure that's the way
Small
they
cap,
would.
big cap, small cap. Yeah,
They'd want me to read it that way because there's outrage
sarcastic
there.
view. What I would say is, right now we believe that the announcements that we made with our console partners are not today, right? So that's all I can say.
Okay.
And they're not shipping today. So I think in time our ray tracing strategy will play out, and I think it'll be perfectly timed for the ecosystem. And so first generation Navi, which is what this is we believe perfect for performance per dollar. And it's exactly what gamers want without the hint of something that's not really happening. And so, out in time, our roadmap will go on, and we'll have more products, and it'll become clear when the time is ready, when ray tracing will be more supported.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the consoles are coming out in a year and a half, at least the Xbox Scarlet. And they're built for much longer product cycles than graphics cards. And I'm sure that all plays into the decision whether to support in the consoles versus graphics cards today and whatnot, too.
I'll let you have that be the answer.
So we have about 5 minutes left. I want to make sure I've not stolen all the time. Brad, you got any follow-up questions you want to ask? Anything that's bringing your mind?
I just had one. It's kind of nitty-gritty, but I just had one question I want to ask. So you guys have done a lot of under-the-hood changes, like the whole new RDNA architecture.
Yeah.
Made all kind. We obviously didn't have time to get into that today, but the clock speeds are much higher for Radeon 5700 than they were for Vega.
That's right.
I really like that you guys introduced the gamer clock.
Yes.
So that makes it more clear. This is what gamers can expect. This is what the maximum is. I was wondering if that gamer clock that you specify for, say, the 5700 XT, its gamer clock is 1755, but the maximum boost clock is a little over 1900.
Yeah.
Once those axial designs and custom cooling designs come out, could we expect to see real world clocks for those custom cooled cards inch up closer to those boost clocks?
I think so. I think our AIBs will be innovative and do their own OC designs, or they'll be able to push it. As they get more experience with it, they'll have different results. Thank you for bringing up Game Clock, by the way. We as a group, Radeon in the past, haven't been necessarily the best at explaining what we call base, boost, and OC in the past. And I really wanted to clean that up, and the engineering team really wanted to clean that up for this launch. And what we call Game Clock is the minimum expected game clock you should see across a variety of games, a ton of like top 100 games. And we wanted to make it something that you should expect out of the box, because we wanted just to set the record straight and just cleaning up going forward. And so I think as our AIB designs come out and they do some innovative things with their own coolers, you should see that game clock potentially inch up. But it's going to be a collaborative effort between ourselves and the AIBs, because what we don't want to have happen is a game clock that's promised that's never delivered. And it's our job to do that for the community. It's we're the ones leading the charge on our game clock and how we set it and enable that through OC specs with our AIB partners. And we want to watch that closely, because we don't want to have a Reddit thread that is disappointed in that again. And so what I would say is we hope to make sure that it's a very straightforward thing going forward. And of course, our AIBs are going to innovate with our clock speeds. And this is just our minimum guarantee with our reference board designs. And I'm pretty excited about all the designs coming out from the AIBs. There's going to be some pretty cool stuff. And I think that you should see some innovation there. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dan, you got and you want to clean up there, because I don't want to leave because I'm sure there's a billion questions, because the last one I have is probably silly rather than actually.
I think there's a lot of very specific nitty gritty stuff, so I think you can just take us out, finish it up.
Well, I feel wrong answering.
Right,
I just had to ask this because I was really surprised, because I put out a question like, hey, any questions for AMD? Is like, Zephram said, Lisa Sue, will you adopt me? And you said,
Oh, no, I'm first in line. Sorry.
Oh,
nice. She's the real deal. You're right. There's a lot of people asking that question.
Thunderdome deathmatch for Lisa Sue adoption.
she should just like, hey, also we're going to put you to work here. You're going to working in hey, because, you're, as we know, those of us with kids, Dan will find this out. You try to put him as work as possible, and you don't have to pay him.
That's why you have kids, right? To put them to work.
Yes, that's the best way.
Maybe you don't want to be adopted then.
Oh, hey, maybe I do have the last question. I forgot to ask this. So, because earlier you mentioned you had a response. NVIDIA, sorry, I got to ask this. NVIDIA basically at E3 said, hey, we basically, I'm going to read this from PC Games N, a report by Jacob Ridley. Radeon Imaging, Sharpening, and Fidelity FX. So we, of course, this is Tony Tomasi, I believe, answering this. So we, of course, have similar techniques for quite some time. Freestyle about a year and a half ago. It was a large number of filters, which includes things like sharpening and color correction. If people find sharpening by itself particularly cool and valuable, we can kind of invest in that. Basically, NVIDIA saying, we got most of the software stuff you've already had. I think anti-lag, the sharpening, we already do that already.
Okay, cool. What I would say is that, we've tried DLSS out in the lab, and I think it's blurry. So I think our implementation's good. But if they have it, they should launch it then and maybe make a deal of it so people get excited. I know gamers want better fidelity with little performance hit. And so that's why we chose to put out our technology features, CAS and RIS. And I think that you'll see even more innovations coming out in the near term. And anti-lag was one of my requests, because when you're playing esports games, you have all these high frames per second. If I can get some of that latency out of there, I want an advantage. So if they have that in their driver, they should maybe enable it or make a deal of it.
Yeah, I think
it's a big deal for the community.
Some people have been running around saying it's just tweaking the number of back buffers, and it's categorically not that. It's not that. You'll see what it is, come July 7th. But I don't think people have what Radeon anti-lag does.
Yeah. Okay. So if people don't know, catch up. Anti-lag was a huge reduction in latency.
Up to 31%.
Click them out.
That's right.
31% is a lot from technology. So.
Yeah. Now, are those titles for those technologies going to have to be like whitelisted or dev support, or are they just going to work for content adaptive shading and anti-lag?
Anti-lag is something we can control. I would not suggest using it in AAA games. It's really an esports feature. Mm-hmm. My strong suggestion is esports only. You could try it in AAA, but it might give you varying results. Radeon image sharpening is out of the box in our driver enablement that should work across games. Fidelity FX using CAS is a feature enablement for our game developers. Yeah, so it's not an out of the box thing. It's an engine like Unity. We announced Unity will be adopting it and others. So that's like our tool set for CAS through Fidelity FX is our tool set through game developers, and RIS is if there's not game adoption yet, you can use that in our driver and get similar results for image sharpening. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Cool. So we'll make the last question a technical question rather than me just being silly. So I'm going to take us out, but I do want to thank again Robert Halleck, far down there.
Thank you.
And Scott Herkelman for coming by the set because it's awesome. July 7th.
July 7th.
7 nanometer GPU, 7 nanometer CPU. So 777.
Seven.
The only company in the world that can sell CPUs and GPUs launch brand new things on the same day.
I'm just I want to see what other people say. I don't know what I can say yet, but it'll be a big day, right? I mean,
We're excited.
Yeah.
So, okay. Check back next week for your fix of PC talk on The Full Nerd. For audio listeners, subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Send questions and comments to thefullnerd@pcworld.com. Every time you do, maybe AMD will add another 7 to the 7. Thanks for coming. I'm Gordon with Brad Charkis.
Adios.
Scott Herkelman from AMD.
Thank you, everyone.
And Robert Halleck from
Thanks,
AMD.
everybody. Cheers.
And Dan will take us out. And bye, baby Leo.
Yeah, I survived. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Cool.
Yeah, that was fun. Thanks,
That
guys.
was fun.